Doxing David. Sent in by Anonymous. This story goes back a few years. I don't recall the exact year, but it was probably between 2010 and 2011. I would have been 20, because I was living with my parents, but attending night college classes. Not really important, but it does help to explain that I wasn't a kid at the time, and I should have known better. Anyways, like a lot of people that have an understanding of surface web versus dark web, I was dumb and curious. There was this one guy in one of my classes that was obviously a basement dweller. Not trying to be rude. He just looked the part. I'm not going to describe him. You know the stereotype. But let's call him Jason. Jason was a bit antisocial, but he and I were decent friends due to our mutual interest in technology. I remember there was one night that class let out early. He and I went out to the lounge on campus, and were talking about random tech stuff. He brought up the dark web, and at the time I wasn't really knowledgeable about what exactly it was. His explanation was pretty straightforward. It was a collection of sites and pages that were essentially hidden from the everyday user. And because of this, it was rife with illegal activity. At first, his explanation was enough to make me lose interest. But then he started showing me the pages he used. He said that the main one was basically a bulletin board like 4chan, but better. He warned me that some of it was questionable, but there were sections where people would talk about philosophy, new technology, politics, and conspiracy theories. Now, I'm a bit of a conspiracy nut. Not in that I believe them. Not in that I believe them, but that I love to read them and see what these people think. Obviously, some of them are completely insane, but there are some theories that are interesting and really get you thinking. When Jason told me about this conspiracy board, it caught my attention. I told him I wanted to get in on it, and he gave me a look that basically said, "I don't think you should be doing this." I told him that I understood the risk, and that I would take any precaution that he suggested. I guess this was enough to convince him. And he gave me a list of things to do when I got home in order to get on the site. He then gave me the onion link to the page, and that was that. I went home, got on my desktop downstairs, and set up everything he said to set up. From there, I got on the bulletin, and spent the entire night reading various conspiracy theories and paranormal explanations. Honestly, this was a highlight of the year. These were some of the craziest theories I'd ever read. After a few days, I started feeling a bit more comfortable and started commenting on posts. For the most part, I would prod for more information, and people were shockingly respectful. I was genuinely surprised about how straightforward the posts were. The people seemed almost decent, and most of them were fairly dismissive to the less than desirable theories out there. The ones against certain races or religions. To be completely honest, this page felt more like a surface web page. They were mostly respectful and open to discussion. The only reason I could think of that this was a deep website would be that they wanted a place to call their own, and not get a ton of traffic. Then, it all went south, fast. There was one post where the theorist started in on something interesting. But then, immediately their entire theory turned into a pile of racist drivel. There weren't any comments from the post yet, so I decided to comment and be a bit of an ass to this guy. Maybe being anonymous had gotten to me, but I posted something like, "Get your racist BS off the board. Your kind isn't welcome here." It was a basic comment, but I was satisfied that the others would back me up and this guy would get the hint and go away. After a few minutes, I went back to the post to see if there were any responses. No surprise, there was. I opened the thread, and there was only one comment from the original poster, and it said the following: "F off, David." I was a bit shocked. My name is in fact David, but I had no idea how he could have known that. I started thinking back to whether or not I maybe posted my name in another thread. If he somehow linked me back to that post. I'd followed all of Jason's recommendations and covered my tracks in every way he had recommended. I decided to feign ignorance. I commented with, "My name's not David. Nice try though." I think that was where I made my biggest mistake. I shouldn't have challenged him. I should have ignored him and moved on. He replied within a few moments, "Oh really, you're not David? Last name, living with Carol and Larry, last name, at 1706, street name, in Asheville, Virginia, attending college name, and working part-time at my place of work?" I was completely in awe. This person had completely gathered all my personal information in a matter of a few minutes, and it was completely accurate. I was honestly sweating at the prospect of this dark web weirdo knowing exactly who I was. I decided I would comment one more time and basically concede this conversation. I wrote, "You win, I'll shut up," or something like that. There may have been more panic in my comment than that. I went back after a few moments and noticed his original comment was gone, and in its place was the following. Overwritten by Mod, to David. "I'll remove your info this time as a courtesy. But it's best you keep your mouth shut from now on. Also, get a better VPN. Your current one is leaking your IP." Apparently the VPN that Jason told me to use had an information leak, one he wasn't aware of, and one that gave away my actual location and registered information. I told Jason about what happened, and he laughed at me. He told me it was my fault because I didn't do an IP check while connected to see if my info was hidden. He was right. That was part of his checklist. That's my dark web story. And it's my only dark web story. Mostly because I never went back. Buying a child. Sent in by Anonymous. I used to be one of those people that liked to go on the deep web for the fun of it, and would frequent a number of the underground style sites. I worked in the IT industry, and for some reason, the deep web and dark web are these strangely taboo things that we aren't supposed to discuss with normal people. But it's not exactly the best kept secret. Those of us that do go on tour and look at things that are, at their best, questionable, it's almost like we can smell it on other users. We all have this weird sixth sense that can tell if the person next to us is one that pursues the deep. Okay, not really, but typically we can tell by your demeanor if you're someone that knows what they're talking about. And most of the time, something on the deep web will come up. I'm the kind of person that knows what they're talking about, probably a bit too well. Let me put it this way. If it was something that was shady, sketchy, unsavory, or otherwise legally grey, I was probably spending some time each and every day looking at it to see what was what. I spent more than my fair share of time on a few deep web community boards, mostly chatting it up with like-minded people that also had too much spare time on their hands. My favourite pastimes were posting on the conspiracy boards. It's crazy what people will say when there's no limit or filter. And honestly, some of the things they say out there may be more true than we'd like to believe. Case in point, hitman sites totally exist, and are more than likely legitimate businesses. Well, the ones that aren't honeypots anyway. Aside from that, there are a lot of marketplaces that exist on the deep web for things that are questionable. But the dark web is where things turn to the downright illegal. I will admit to having spent my fair share of time and money on deep web markets. I've bought things that are illegal to own, and I've seen things that I shouldn't have seen. And things I definitely didn't want to see. That said, I wanted to write this quick story about one of the marketplaces that actually kind of freaked me out and made me pull away from the illegal stuff. There was a particular marketplace that existed that touted itself as the be-all and end-all of dark web markets, and was essentially this massive dark web version of Craigslist or Facebook Market. If you were looking for something that you shouldn't have been, and were willing to spend Bitcoin, then you were in luck, because odds were that they had it. Bootleg movies? Check. Viagra from another country? Check. Computers potentially stolen from a government facility? You guessed it. Check. However, it got a bit deeper than that. They also had services that you could pay for. Nothing like the hitman sites. But if you wanted to, quote unquote, have a good time with someone about to die, then you could. Hey, I don't judge others for what they do behind closed doors. I keep my opinions to myself and just live my life. That said, I actually stumbled on something that I initially thought, no way that's real. Until I messaged the seller, and then, well, I'm not so sure anymore. It could have been a honeypot, or a fed trap. But if so, it was a damn good one. I was checking out the market one afternoon, looking for something stupid. I think I was looking for shoes or something. Don't ask. When I stumbled upon something that was simply labeled new. I like new things, so I eagerly clicked it and went to read what was so interesting about this new product. Well, this new product wasn't really a product. The description read something like, and I'm paraphrasing, have access to any age up to 7 and can deliver. Forged paperwork extra. Must have payment ready for any and all offers. Obviously, this first thought was that this was a full-on honeypot or scam for people that were looking for children, which would be a fairly niche scam if you think about it. So I defaulted to honeypot, and because I was a bit of an edgy 20-something, I decided I'll message the seller and mess with them a bit. I logged into my account on the market. I went to the user to send them a message. I asked something along the lines of, how do we know you're legitimate and not a fed trying to arrest someone? They responded with, you don't. Which kind of solidified the honeypot idea I had in mind already. I responded with, can you prove that you're legitimate? I have the Bitcoin ready if you're an actual seller. Again, just trying to goad this person to give me anything that would confirm my personal bias. They sent me a message back saying, boy or girl, and how old. I had to think on this one for a second. I wanted to give him something that would be tough to respond with. So I said, boy, around 5. He then asked me for my name. He sent back some pictures of a little boy that looked to be around 4 or 5 years old. In the pictures, the boy looked pretty happy. He was in a basement area playing with toys, and there was one of him watching SpongeBob on TV. I was actually getting a bit nauseous with this whole thing, so I responded back saying, is he the one that's for sale? At this point, I felt like I needed to gather as much info as I possibly could to take to the authorities. The seller responded, he's one of them, yes. I then asked him to prove he didn't just send me pictures of his own kid to try and bait me. He then asked me my name again, which was a question I had tried to avoid prior. I was a bit nervous at first, for obvious reasons, so I told him my name was Marcus. It's not, but you don't tell people on the dark web your real name. After I told him my name, I hadn't gotten a response back for about an hour, and I was almost certain he was a fed that was tracking me at this point. That is, until he did finally respond. I got a message back with an MP4 attached to it, and in the video was the boy, playing with a couple of Hot Wheels. In the video, you could hear a man talking, and I'm assuming he was the seller. The man asked the boy what his name was, and the boy said Tony. The man then asked who was filming him, and the boy said Uncle Will. Then the man said, and who was the video for? The boy said, Uncle Marcus. He then asked, and why are we making the video? And the little boy laughed and responded with, to find a new mommy and daddy. There was a bit more back and forth, to prove this child was legitimate, and to show the seller wasn't messing around. He then ended the video with, now that you can see little Tony here is very real, and in need of a good loving home, let's talk payment. I prefer Bitcoin, but will take any of the current stable coins. I'll be waiting for your response. You'd better believe I took that information and video straight to the authorities, in the form of an anonymous communication. I know, I'm a bit of a coward, but when you're a criminal taking down bigger criminals, it's best not to put your name on anything. I don't know what happened with the case. I'm assuming they passed it on to the FBI division that handles this stuff. but I haven't been hunted down or arrested or killed yet, so I guess things are going smoothly. And, unfortunately, this should serve as proof that, yes, you can literally buy anything off the dark web. Hitman page call. Sent in by Anonymous. This happened a couple of years ago. I don't remember the exact month or year, but it couldn't have been just a few years ago because Bitcoin was at or near its peak. I used to spend a lot of time in the deep web, mostly on forums and things like that, but never on anything that was explicitly illegal. I know, that sounds incredibly convincing, right? Believe it or not, there are pages on the deep web that are good for entertainment. Some of them are in a grey area as far as ethics go, but again, not explicitly illegal. And some of them only become illegal if you take action on the page, I think. Look, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really know. Anyways, I was browsing pages without intent to actually do anything on them, and I was just perusing through some random onion links to see what interesting stuff I could find. After checking out some random pages that sold things that were definitely not legal, I found a page that, well, again, definitely was not legal. From the start on the page, I knew this page was serious. The name of the page was something like L.H. Oswald Solutions, an obvious allusion to Lee Harvey Oswald, the man who assassinated JFK. Honestly, seeing that made me chuckle. Something about using Oswald's name for the page was genuinely humorous. After reading their information, it was pretty clear why they used that as the name. The entire page was meant for users to pay Bitcoin and hire a hitman. The page explained they had top-tier men working for them, and price categories as well. The product started at intimidation, and included things like arson, murder designed to look like a failed robbery, and had other tiers that were meant to make it look like an accident. The last one was the most expensive, obviously, and they gave scenarios on how it could happen, including hiking incidents, accidental drownings, and car troubles. Now, I had no intent on doing anything on this page, other than reading what they had to say, mostly for entertainment. But then I got to the bottom of the main page. They had a full-on legal disclosure, which I thought was hilarious, that explained what actions could be taken if they failed and laid out their personal guarantee that they could find anyone and everyone without fail. Immediately after this was a small note at the bottom. We can find anyone. And we can prove it. Click here for proof. Now, I know what you're thinking. No sane person would ever click that link. And no one could be so stupid to click it intentionally. I didn't want to. But I had to. I had to know how they would guarantee that they could find anyone. So, I clicked the button, and the page switched over to a plain black site with a smiley face, and an hourglass icon that indicated it was loading. After a few seconds, the hourglass turned into a check mark. At first I thought that was it. It was just going to sit there with a check mark and that was it. Then, much to my surprise, my cell phone started ringing. Obviously I was freaking out inside, but I answered the phone anyway. I said, "Hello?" The voice on the other end was digitized, thankfully. It basically said, "Here's your proof. Thank you for considering our services." A few times, then hung up. I was actually grateful that it was a robocall, and not a real person, but I was also terrified that it was able to find my number and call me. This was enough to tell me they weren't screwing around, and that I needed to never go to their website, or question whether or not those hitmen sites are legit, ever again. Human meat. Sent in by Anonymous. Hey everyone. I wanted to post this story up in hopes of explaining the horror that you actually find on the dark web. Honestly, most of the things you find on the dark web aren't actually the horror movie cliché-lin websites that everyone seems to think they are. most of the dark web is questionable or illegal adult content. People wanting to buy medications illegally, etc. If you're wanting something like what you see in the movies, you actually have to know where to look, as in have the onion link. I'm not saying those things don't exist. They just aren't easily or readily available. A lot of people tend to think it's like a dark version of Google, where you can search for crazy stuff and be given results within a few moments. It's really not. Anyways, that out of the way, I want to talk about a dark web experience that was honestly horrifying for my friends and I. This was several years ago. I think we were 17 at the time, and we thought we were hackers. I know, it sounds stupid, but the three of us were all about the nerdy crap. Python, networking, and again, quote-unquote, hacking. I'll spare myself the embarrassment of explaining all of that. Just know we knew our way around a computer. Naturally, the three of us gravitated towards places like Reddit, and then 4chan and such. I don't remember where we heard about the dark web. Probably from a friend, the news, or one of the aforementioned websites. But when we learned about the difference between surface web and dark web, our curiosity was piqued. We started looking into what it was, what was out there, and what we could do. And of course we were enchanted with the hacker haven it was glorified to be. We thought we would get on there, look at some of the questionable sites, and be the coolest kids because we accessed content that others didn't know existed. So we did what we had to, loaded up Tor, got information for some onion links, and got ready to have our minds blown. Of course, it ended up being not as interesting as we thought it was going to be. The sites were plain and bland. We saw a couple of sites selling pills. Others we didn't even bother scrolling through because of the front pages. And a few webcam sites that we honestly weren't interested in. I think all of us were getting a bit disappointed in what we were finding. Though I don't know what we were expecting to find, really. I think we just started clicking through, going anywhere and everywhere we could get into. Looking back, this was a really stupid idea. After clicking around for a while, we ended up on a page that looked a little flashier than the others. I can't remember the name of the page, but I think it was something along the lines of your choice or something like that. As we started on the home screen, the whole page looked like it was a site for a butcher shop. There were a number of pictures of meat slices and cuts all over the front page, explaining the quality and what seasoning went best with each piece. Unfortunately, I think you can all see where this is going. We ended up on a page with a list of cuts, and each of them had a diagram of a person. The part where the meat came from was highlighted. Some of what was on the page was horribly graphic, so I won't explain it in this story. But you can imagine what was all there. One of the most disturbing parts of this website was its explanation on its sourcing. I recall explaining that all packaging would be discreet, and they would include their own seasoning packet that would go best with what you choose. What's worse, they explained all their meat was fresh and sourced on demand. They touted the fact they had the ability to get everything when it was ordered. Obviously, we were freaked out by seeing this. Seeing this kind of meat. We got off the site and pretty much immediately removed Tor. We all kept up our pursuits in the IT world. But I don't think any of us have been on the dark web since. Human Meat Part 2. Sent in by Anonymous. This story is related to one you've told in the past. You could see it as a continuation or addition to it. I'm not the author of the story, but I've had a similar experience. The story in question In the one you mentioned, I think back in your first dark web video, about the kids who ended up on the human meat shop. If any of you don't recall the story, first off, you should go and listen to the video. But it was about a group of kids that were messing around on the dark web, and ended up on a butchery site that listed human meat, and explained how to properly prepare it, advertised their special seasoning, and gave all the information about the specific human cuts. They also touted that they sourced on demand, meaning that they had the ability to get the meat when you requested it, so they had it on standby, and they would kill and cut it when you wanted it. Think of it like Wendy's fresh, never frozen promise, but for cannibals. Yeah, it was legitimately some creepy stuff. And what's even worse, it's legitimate. I can actually vouch for the legitimacy of the human meat market. I don't know about the exact page they were on. It could have been a honeypot. Who knows? But there are a handful of pages you can actually work with to get human cuts. I have actually spoken with people that claim to have eaten human meat, and they've told me it tastes close to veal, but depending on the person's fitness level, can also taste closer to pork. I don't know about you, but that thought makes me gag and want to become a vegan. That said, I actually had a bit of a story about another dark web site that was similar, but took it a bit further in their intentions. I'm not going to name the page. I don't want your listeners going out there and becoming man-eaters. Plus, it is super illegal to buy human meat. Duh. But there was, and probably is still, a dark website out there that is dedicated to cannibalism. But they see it more as a religious experience than anything. You heard it right. They see the practice of cannibalism as a religious experience. This group of people on this page firmly believe they are loving thy neighbor isn't enough. You should also gnaw on their shins with a bit of sweet baby rays. Sorry, bad joke. Humor aside, I'm being completely serious. This site was built by a group of people, a cult if you will, that held the firm belief that the ultimate act a human could perform to get closer to God was to consume their fellow man. Their ethos basically stated that eating human meat caused a change in your biology, and would make you more than human. It said something about how it was basically the way to climb up the food chain, and that the only thing above humans were gods. Thus, being more than human made you godlike. I remember reading a lot of the information on the site, and thinking, wow, these people are completely and totally insane. But they definitely held tight to their own beliefs, and didn't shy away from what they thought. Like I said, this was pretty obviously a cult, and it used all the expected cult language, pushing you to become more than what you are, talking about how their leader was given this message from God himself, and trying to gather more members through positive reinforcement of their ideology. They had a section where you could sign up for a meeting to come and see what their group was about, which to me felt like a method of getting more victims. But maybe they were legitimately recruiting people. Much like the other page, they had all the basics. How to prepare the meat, what flavors went best with which parts, how to safely eat your human meat, which is an interesting thought. There was even an entire section of the page dedicated to their members and their rankings, their favorite activities. It was honestly like an icebreaker page that was made to show you that everyday people were also willing to eat other everyday people. Overall, it was a 10 out of 10 on my what the fuck meter, and if I ever disappear after sending the story, you'll know what happened. I'll just hope they pair me with a nice salad to balance out the meal. Mr. Network. Sent in by Anonymous. My dark web story is one that actually happened recently, within the last 4 to 5 months actually, and it's one of the most disturbing and sickening things that I've ever seen or experienced in my 32 years of being on this earth. There are some really sick people out there, and I want to say to those of you listening, stay off the dark web. enjoy the stories told by those of us who are stupid enough to get involved in it. But don't get curious enough to drag yourself into the mud. Like most people, living in this quarantine has left me with an excessive amount of spare time on my hands. I am still employed, thankfully, but I get to work from the comfort of my living room. I'm not going to name my employer or my job title for obvious security reasons, but I will say I'm pretty much the guy on the network team that gets to sit home and watch data traffic spikes for the company's applications and websites. To be honest, I probably have one of the easiest jobs out there. I have to watch a graph system, as it shows how much data our servers are pushing and receiving. And unless we get hit with a denial of service attack, there's not much to be done. If anything does happen, I have to get on the phone and talk with the other networking guys about what actions we want to take. Then have my weekly report call with my boss to tell her that everything is working as intended. We aren't a huge company, and we upgraded our servers at the end of last year, which was perfect timing. So there's honestly not a whole lot to do on the day-to-day. Based on what I just said, you can probably assume I know my way around a computer. I've worked in IT my whole career, and I like to believe I can hold my own out there. I know how networks run, I understand data routing, and I know a lot about data encryption and security. During the start of quarantine, I started studying more about data security and such, and ended up being interested in Tor, onion routing, and how the deep web and dark web differ from the surface web. If you really want some interesting reads, you should look into Mariana's Web. It's an interesting rabbit hole. As most technically adapted people do, I got both bored and curious about what existed out there in the deeper parts of the internet. I didn't want to do anything illegal, but part of me wanted to be familiar with what content and activities existed beyond the surface. I know this is stupid, but boredom and extra time can be a terrifying motivator when you kind of know what you were doing. I went through the process of setting up my personal system to get on the deep web, installed Tails, set up Tor, got a decent VPN after some vetting, did my security checks. I started going through some of the onion links that were easily accessible. For the most part, they were innocent sites that really didn't have anything crazy on them. I was simply pursuing the pages, not getting heavily involved. I found a lot of what you would expect to find: adult content, a few illegal shop sites, various conspiracy boards and other forums. Just some basic deep web content that didn't really stand out. Then I ended up on a page that I would never have expected to see on the deep web. A dating site. I say dating site, but based on the explanation of their service and some of the profiles, I think it was meant to be more like Tinder. One-night stand interactions with little or no commitment. What I found was that the dating page was set up in what I could only call categories, basically split into what you were looking for in a partner. It had categories for race, ethnicity, background, sexual preference, personal kinks, and even this section that was basically for sugar daddies. If you don't know what that is, I'm not going to explain it to you. One category under the personal kinks section made me curious, as it was something I wasn't sure about. It was called Chasers. I clicked on it and decided I would spend a few minutes looking through the profiles. What I ended up finding was nothing short of legitimately horrifying. The profile I clicked on was of a middle-aged guy. He was fairly attractive, and looked like he was someone who could do well on any of the other dating apps. I was reading through who he was, trying to figure out what the hell made him a chaser, when I got to the bottom of his profile. It read the following: I'm looking for anyone who can help me achieve my lifelong dream of being physical with an HIV-infected individual. This further section further outlined how it was a goal of his to catch the disease, and that he was willing to pay almost any amount to do this. I went to another profile, and it was a young man that explained he'd been infected with COVID, and that he'll be willing to give it to anyone that wanted it for the price of a nice dinner. The third profile I went to was looking for someone to hurt or severely injure them while being intimate. And I'm not even going to explain the specifics of what he wanted, but that person definitely needed to seek help. This entire category was of people looking to catch diseases, or give diseases to each other. And if you were looking to be injured, a lot of them were willing to pay for these services, saying it was a deep fantasy of theirs. I think the most disgusting one, besides the ones I had mentioned, was a man requesting to be with a woman who had terminal cancer. There's nothing inherently wrong with being with someone who has cancer. I have no issue with that. But he was treating it like a fetish, and listed in his profile that the sicker the better. Again, he listed he was willing to pay significant amounts of money, or even take care of medical costs for this. This site cemented in my mind that there are some very, very disturbed people out there. I closed it and shut down my laptop. I won't say it was the last time I ever got on the deep web, but it definitely made me more careful about where I went, and less curious about what was out there. Ron was almost murdered. This story isn't mine personally. I'm not the type of person to go on the deep web for any reason. This story actually happened to a co-worker and a good friend of mine. I made sure he was okay with me submitting the story, and he said it was fine. For the sake of privacy and security, we're going to refer to him as Ron. Ron's a good guy, probably one of the nicest people I ever met, and he really didn't deserve the situation that happened to him. I will say I've known him for several years now, and I completely believe everything he's told me about this. Several years ago, Ron lived in a comfortable suburban home with his lovely wife of 10 years. And for the sake of security, we're going to call her Karen. Ron and Karen had a 7-year-old daughter at the time of this story, and everything seemed alright. Ron had a good job and made more money than they actually needed. Karen was a stay-at-home mom that took care of their daughter when she was home, and ran the various errands while she was at school, pretty much doing the basics of what a stay-at-home parent does. Ron was under the impression that their marriage was in a good position. He loved Karen as much as he always had. He loved his daughter more than life itself. They had a nice house in a nice neighborhood, and they had enough money to take care of any financial emergencies if they needed it. To the best of Ron's knowledge, they were all happy and healthy. He didn't think anything was wrong at home. Karen, on the other hand, was apparently very unhappy with their marriage, and was determined to leave Ron and run off with some guy she had met online and had been talking to for around a year. Karen and her internet boyfriend apparently spent a lot of time plotting, and spoke extensively how they were going to follow through on what they had planned, and what would be the best way to get the deed done. At one time, they even discussed the possibility of internet boyfriend driving from his home in Nebraska and doing it himself, saying he could make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Apparently this would have been too personal, and they opted to look on the dark web for someone to remove her husband from the equation. Then, she would wait long enough to bury him, collect insurance, and pretend to grieve. After a few months, she planned to then take her daughter and the money from his life insurance and run off with the boyfriend to start a new life up north. Based on the conversations, she was adamant it needed to look like an accident. That way the life insurance would pay out the maximum. Like I said, Ron made good money and was worth a decent amount dead, so she planned to live a few years off that with the new guy. Back to their actual plan. As I said, they had the intent of going on the dark web and finding, basically, a hitman to get rid of her husband. Apparently, they were successful to an extent. They got on the deep web, they found a site that listed people providing these services, and they got the information for someone they were going to pay to do the entire thing. They even went as far as sending the $15,000 to the account of the person who was supposed to do the job. Thankfully, for Ron, his wife and her new boyfriend were not well versed on how things worked on the dark web. and to some extent were kind of stupid. Apparently, they went all the way through plotting with this person, sent him the money and even set a date. On the date in question, Karen had taken their daughter to her grandparents' house and had told Ron that she was going to spend the day with them. While she was gone, Ron got a visit by the local police and a federal agent. They explained the situation to him and basically took him into protective custody. When Karen got home, she expected to find her husband lying dead on the living room floor, but instead had federal agents screaming at her and taking her to the ground. What's worse, she apparently had brought their daughter home with her, meaning she would have been okay with the little girl seeing her dead father. Based on what Ron was told, the police had all of the information on the conversation, connection logs from when she was on the page, emails from her to the fake hitman, and enough evidence to put her away for a long time. Apparently, she was so desperate to get rid of him, she literally sent $15,000 on a credit card over PayPal to have her husband murdered. I don't know if she was just ignorant, or if she just wanted it done and wasn't going to question the situation. Thankfully, for Ron's sake, she had gotten a hold of a sting on the site, and she was taken down without issue. The boyfriend was also arrested, and they were charged for conspiracy to commit murder, and probably a few other charges, but they were both sentenced to 20 years in prison for their plans. Ron has since remarried, and his daughter is old enough to understand what her mother did. But he says he got lucky with this, and I agree. If his wife had gone to another page, been a little more competent, and paid a little more attention to being secure in her messaging and communications, Ron may have been legitimately murdered that day, and she'll be off living with her internet boyfriend in the Dakotas. Security leak from a cult. Like many people, I decided to see what was on the dark web and see what was actually on there. I watched some videos and some guides on how to do it safely. I heard rumors of people getting their computers hacked and messed with. Not to mention some other people have had far worse fates happen to them. It was difficult to determine which of these stories were fact and which were fiction. I guess people who frequented the dark web would have been more aware about what was going on. I used one of my older laptops that I didn't care about if it got damaged. I wiped all the personal info and files that could cause issues if someone got their hands on it. I guess if something ended up messing with the laptop, I would just have an old, outdated paperweight that I could easily get rid of and forget about. I downloaded the Tor browser, and the thing I hated the most was how slow it was. I nearly lost interest with that alone. A lot of the sites wouldn't load, and when they did, they weren't all that great to look at. Most of them looked so damn old, and I was left feeling so underwhelmed. I was reminded of sites I saw from the 90s. I saw so many videos on YouTube about the dark web, and I was feeling quite frustrated about it. It was so boring. I didn't know what I was looking for specifically. I heard some people had stumbled on some absolutely vile content, and I didn't want to do that. I wasn't really interested in drugs or anything. I wanted to see weird but mostly harmless things. I guess I could have done that on the surface web. Cults have always been fascinating to me. I was curious about the different cults and things. I love checking out this sort of thing. Guilty pleasure and all of that. After clicking on several dead links, I found one that looked pretty good. I don't know if I should name the site, especially with what they know about me, but everyone on the page was smiling. It was probably a generic stock image. They spoke of happiness, a world without money, or the stress of a 9-to-5 job, where everyone was equal and treated well. All things that should be the case, but unfortunately they were usually wrapped up with one psycho or another. I kept scrolling. The site looked like it was made in the early 2000s. It was gaudy and slow, and it being on the dark web didn't help either. I hate to say it, but part of me wants to know more about the cult. Who they were, how they managed to get members. Why did they post it on the dark web instead? I have never heard of them before, so I thought maybe I could just Google them. But when I searched them, I found absolutely nothing. There was always a chance it was a prank played by some teenager, wanting to get a rise out of people. I pondered making a YouTube video on it, maybe a series, maybe a way to earn some money in the future. So I used my phone to record and document what I was finding. I used a Proton email account to avoid using my real one, and told them I had some questions. I didn't know why I was doing this. Over time, checking the site and seeing if there were any updates became an addiction. It was like living a double life. On one hand, I was a devout member of this cult, reading and learning about the teachings, and learning more about the members, especially the leader. While on the other hand, I was going to school and living a normal life. One of my friends asked about what I was doing and went into vivid details about it. We laughed a lot about it. In one of the emails I received my next learning instructions. I wasn't surprised by it. It was the same talk of, help us grow, brother, repent, acknowledge the divine leader, and that sort of thing. The topics of the emails blurred into each other by this point. They all sounded the same. But this time, at the end, it was signed with my name, and not the alias I used when I contacted the site. I decided there was enough snooping on these sites, and the dark web. Every so often, I will receive an email from the cult. They mention something small about me, and after a month, I decided to let the email die. I don't want to deal with it anymore. I'm scared at some point the cult will try to reach out to me in the real world. So far, nothing has happened, and I'm worried they'll contact all the people in my real life. Please, does anyone have any advice for me? Stalked me using technology. When I was in my early 20s, I dated a friend of a friend. We were mutual friends. We saw each other before, but we never really interacted. We certainly knew each other by name. We met at a party and he was great at first. He was friendly and made good conversation and was pretty good looking too. I was instantly interested in him and we had great chemistry with each other. We met up constantly and I was so happy I decided to give him a chance. Months in, we decided to go steady and be exclusive with each other. We set our statuses on Facebook and some other places too. We took so many pictures together and posted them on social media. And for nearly 10 months things were going fantastic. He slept over my place plenty of times and I stayed at his too. I really enjoyed being with him. One day I wasn't feeling the best, so I told him I wanted a quiet day, and spent the day on my computer in a video call with my friends. We were all laughing and watching a movie together. It was so good to have some girl time together because I spent so much time with my boyfriend. One of my friends, I'll call her Dana, made a comment about missing me, and jokingly said that I was spending way too much time with him. The next day I didn't hear from my ex, and it wasn't like him to not send a message by now. I messaged him and said good morning. He looked at it and left me on read. Weird, but maybe he was too busy to answer, and I didn't worry about it. I waited a couple of hours and sent another message to ask if he was okay. He told me he was fine, and I knew he was clearly not fine. He'd never acted like this before, and I was surprised by it. I told him if he was angry with me, I'd rather he told me why. He asked how sick I was, and I told him it must have been a temporary stomach bug. And that when I felt a little better, I went on a video call with my friends and we watched a movie. He seemed satisfied by my answer, and at the time I wasn't exactly sure why. I was just happy that he had calmed down. Things were good again, but months later we had some more relationship difficulties. He told me he didn't like some of my friends and that he didn't want me to see them anymore. I asked him exactly what he didn't like about them. He just told me he didn't think they were a good fit for me, but wouldn't explain exactly why. There was one person in particular he didn't like, and that was Dana. He always made little nasty comments about her, implying that she was a bad person. I told him I needed a reason why he wanted me to cut them off, and I didn't like him interfering with my friendships. He scowled and didn't speak to me for a couple of days. I talked to Dana about it, and she wasn't sure where the hostility was coming from. She'd always been civil with him. I thought that would be the end of it, but no. He slipped one time and mentioned something I told Dana in private. I thought maybe Dana said it to someone else and asked her about it. She denied it. I was angry about this and he supported me, told me to stop being friends with her, and if I loved him, I would do it. I hated that. I vented to some of my friends both on my phone and on the computer about it. I said how frustrated I was, that he had no right to do what he did, and that it wasn't fair of him to do this. When he confronted me about it, he knew near enough everything I said. I doubted all my friends would have run off to tell him, and some of them barely knew him, or only knew of him. I asked how he knew and he got incredibly defensive. This went on for months, and whenever we had any issues he would always know about them. It turns out he put spyware on my phone and a keylogger on my computer, probably when I wasn't looking or he needed to borrow my phone or computer for something. I confronted him about this massive breach of privacy and he said it was normal. That all couples do this. I screamed at him this wasn't normal at all. He told me that all his exes had been fine with it. And I reminded him that he never even mentioned it to me. And I certainly wouldn't have agreed. Nor did he ever offer to show me his phone or other devices. I got my computer and phone cleared of any nasties, changed passwords, and did everything I could to protect myself. I made sure I changed all my passwords at a friend's place too. After a while, I couldn't relax, so I ended up getting a new phone and computer when I could. I couldn't shake the feeling he was spying on me for a long time after. I make sure to lock all my devices now. I also regularly check to make sure my information hasn't been leaked, and made sure there were no changes to my private information. It has been so stressful and it could have been avoided if I was more careful. What was even creepier, he left hidden cameras in my room at some point. I'm terrified what he did with those pictures or videos. I change in there. I have so many private moments in there. It's supposed to be my sanctuary. Sometimes I can't escape the feeling I'm being watched. This story won't be the worst story in the list, I guess. I don't let my partners use my devices anymore, unless I'm there to keep an eye on what they're doing. I don't like how he invaded my privacy and had access to my information without my permission. I don't even like inviting people into my room anymore. I just want to feel safe again. Keep an eye on your devices, people. I found my enemy on the dark web. My friends have recently got into browsing the dark web. It's fun to log on and see what was on there. We didn't really stumble on anything that was too weird. Not at the start, anyway. We wanted to track down some friends we lost touch with. The usual places didn't work. Facebook, Insta, etc. Nothing. We looked up their family members to try to find some clues. We felt like we were spies or something. It was amazing. We eventually found a site that was blank, except for a search text square. Above it, it said to enter any piece of information you had about the person, and it would dig more up. We didn't want to potentially endanger a friend or something, so we put in the old high school bully's name. It was typed in and then we pressed enter. It was searching and it was pretty slow too. While we waited, we laughed and gossiped about how we imagined her looking now. After a few minutes, the results came up, and we were shocked at what we managed to find. We found some old phone numbers for her, some pictures of her throughout the years, and we took pleasure in knowing that they had not been kind. We laughed and kept scrolling. It turned out she had a really rough couple of years. She put on a lot of weight and we were being such toxic assholes. We kept scrolling until we saw something we hated. There was a newspaper report that said she had been murdered. It changed the mood of the room, and instantly we regretted how shitty we had been moments before. We kept scrolling, and found pictures of her autopsy. It was gruesome seeing the process, and we stared dumbly at the screen. What the F did we stumble on? We kept scrolling and came to a video of her being strangled to death. She was kicking and screaming, trying to pull the electrical cords from around her neck while the masked man strangled her. She choked. Her face went blue and finally, she went still. Did we just watch a snuff video? We hoped this was all fake, but it didn't look fake. We were all silent as we stared at the screen. It ruined the jokes and we felt wrong being able to see that. No one should have been able to see that. We clicked away, all too ashamed to look at each other. We decided to search for her on the surface web, Google, that sort of thing. There were reports she had been murdered and where her body had been found. The murderer still hasn't been caught. I hope you enjoyed these dark web stories set to relaxing rain music. These stories have been sent in by subscribers or by friends of mine. Let me know if you'd like to hear more stories set to rain sounds, and I will happily make another compilation for you. If you haven't yet, why not like the video, comment and subscribe? It really helps me out. Why not check out my ASMR channel if you haven't already? I'll be posting more videos on there soon. This video is made with the support of my incredible channel members, patrons, subscribers, and all my viewers. Thank you so much for supporting me. I want you all to know you are all greatly appreciated. Check out my social media links down below. Stay safe, my little spooklings. And remember, I'll be watching you.